A common question I get these days is, okay, DJ, what do you think I should do in my career to move things forward? We've been looking at this for the last few years, and what I want to do today is show you the four things that really you need to focus on at a high level for success in your IT career. So what we're going to do today is show you a little bit about my story, but honestly, I'm getting a little tired of telling just my story. So what we're going to do is show you some of the survey results that we've collected over the last few years and be able to tell your story. And that way we can look at what kind of things are needed to move forward and learn the four keys to IT success. To learn the four keys to IT success. And then we're going to play a little game called Choose Your Own Career Adventure. So let's get started with a little bit about me. If we're just meeting for the first time, my name is DJ Eshelman, and I grew up with no electricity or running water. Awkward, I know, but right here in the United States, this is how I grew up. And I actually ended up going into college and got a degree in psychology. I know I'm not exactly setting up the best pedigree for being an IT expert here, but hang with me and get my whole story. But what I need you to know for today is that it was one of those things where I just went all in and ended up getting into the consulting work eventually and turned that into a six-figure practice with a company that I own called Bot Consulting, or Belt of Truth Consulting. And so that is my consulting wing, I guess you could say. And then I took all this knowledge that I had and started to distill this down into books and courses. And so first I wrote Be a Citrix Hero, and then Just Do This, a simpler way to succeed in IT. Published both of those in 2020. And then at that time, it was clear we needed a little bit more. It wasn't just a COVID thing. It was something that was already in the works, and COVID was just a perfect excuse for it. So started the Thrive IT YouTube channel and some other efforts there with the blog and even some media consulting work that we do these days. And so that is cruising right along with Thrive IT. But nowadays, I do something really unique that I like to call coach salting. It's combining all these years of coaching that I've done on the side more and all the consulting that I've done a lot of, and figure out why not just merge these two into one. And so maybe that's a topic for a future video, but just know that that is my heart. That is my way of serving these days, is not just being that consultant and not just being a coach, but putting them together. And so that's essentially what we're going to do today, is I'm going to show you a little bit of that. So enough about me. Let's talk about you. So when I say you, I mean widely the people that responded to these surveys, about 300 or so, which is a good sample. And I think this is a good way to tell where people are at and what I can do in response to that. So one of the things we asked is, what current role do you have? And to my surprise, only a little bit of folks said that they were in a service desk role today. Now, about 25% of people said that they were in a systems administration type role. And then the bigger chunk of people, about 36%, said that they were in an engineering type role. But then some of you said that you were in an architect role, about 16%. And then we go into the others that say they're like consultant, like myself. Some were in management, and about 3% were in management, actually, significant later. And then some are in those kind of sales or sales engineering type roles, and then working for a company in that way. And then a lot of people are in marketing that are answering these surveys, which is cool. And so those are where we're at today. I also asked about overall career goals, and this is where things get really, really interesting. So about 70% said that they want to advance their career. And when we boiled this down a little bit and distilled this down a bit more, basically 36% say they're not really sure what they want to do, but they want to stay within IT, information technology. About 36% others want to advance into management or leadership roles, which is a big key and a big shift on what we're doing these days. This is largely why I have decided to change our focus at Thrive IT to be much more getting people equipped into those leadership roles, because frankly, there's a gap there and a lot of companies aren't really doing a good job of equipping people to be in those roles. They're just putting them in that roles. So we'll talk more about that in a future video. But 18% or so, they want to shift away from IT, but still be advancing their career forward. And so these are, generally speaking, what I was expecting more or less. But I'll be honest with you, the numbers that I was not expecting is the amount of people that actually do want to go into leadership. Believe it or not, I actually find that encouraging. Now, 20% want to stay where they're at. In other words, they're happy where they're at. Now, we could have done far into the details here, but my thinking is that those that are already in those management leadership roles, if they're already an architect, already doing consulting, they probably want to stay where they're at. And so that is, I think, the main driver here. And we'll see that in a moment here. But about 10% say that they want to shift their career sideways. In other words, they want to look at other ways they can be serving that aren't necessarily in their current roles. Whether that's in IT or not, we'll see. Now, let's talk about these future roles. These are basically changes that you want to make in your career pathway. And so, interestingly enough, we saw a slight increase in people that want to be on the service desk. I don't know what that means. Maybe it was just less people got to this point in the survey is my guess, but regardless, just being transparent here, that is a data point we did see. But significantly less people want to be a systems administrator in the future. In fact, this is down to about 5% from that original 25%. Now, as far as people want to be an engineer, this is where things get interesting. That's actually down as well. 17% from the original 36% are now saying that they would want to be an engineer down the road. Now, when it comes to being a systems architect, this is where things get fascinating. And that is that about 52% of people said that they would want to be in an architect role from the current 16. Interestingly enough, you could actually probably put the consulting in there as well to get well above 70%, I believe. Which is cool. Now, management also expanded. This is something where we see numbers to 7% from the original 3. And it's worth noting here that the sales and marketing roles also increased as well. The good news is the people that are seeing me these days that actually care are those that are very much interested in advancing their careers and actually going forward and having more positions of significance in their particular role. So that is encouraging. And I want to take just a moment to applaud you for wanting to be better. Unless you're that 20% that just wants to stick around and be just nothing more, we'll talk. Let's get into the 4 keys that I have identified for IT success. And the notion here is that learning new technology is really not the way to advance your career. Technology is that minimum requirement. In other words, yes, you need to know the tech, but that's not what's required to move forward in your career. I talk about this a lot, and there's a good reason for that. This is something where it's very much needing to be talked about. So if we visualize a target and we set our sights on that target, there are, like I said, 4 key areas that are going to be used to hit that target. And the first is mindset. The second is mentoring. The third is methodology, which is one of my favorites. The fourth is mastery. Now, mastery of these technical skills. Now, unsurprisingly, this is where most people start in technology, and that is in this mastery area. And unfortunately, a lot of people only go this far, which is why we obviously can't ignore it. But at the same time, we need to be addressing the level of focus here. In other words, if this is all you're focused in on, would you say you have a committed area of mastery? So what are the things we've noted about those that are considered successful is that they have yeah, sure, they have a general knowledge, but they have a specific specialization. In other words, what are they known for? And so when you consider these people, you need to know that they are known for things. So, for example, for me, that thing was Citrix. That's what I'm most well known for. And not just because I wrote a book on it, because there were things that I was doing that were true about that in the Citrix world. And so that's what I was known for. Now, there are a lot of ways to learn this sort of thing. And these would include things like going with an on-demand course, cohort style, which means that you're learning with other people at a certain pace and kind of a community. Yeah, there's books, there's live trainings, there's a lot more than that too. But the key here is that if you want to get ahead with a specialization, you need to get into ways to accelerate that. Sure, there's labs and things like that you can do, but honestly, my advice these days is to borrow other people's success and do it that way. Now, what I asked in the survey was to identify some methods that you like to learn as far as mastery goes. And honestly, it works for other things too. But as far as learning these skill sets, what you told me is that you like self-paced or online courses. In fact, when I did the whole thing of survey, there were like 12 different options, and in-person learning was dead last. And I find that ironic because that's actually what a lot of companies will put up a lot of money to do, because obviously this is what the vendors want you to do. They want you to spend a lot of money to get somebody to train you in person, that sort of thing. And that was actually the least preferred and least successful option for people. So if you're watching this and you are in control of those budgets, hey, guess what? You're better off funding a self-paced option or a membership-based option where there's like a all-you-can-eat thing. So second way was books. Those are the second most popular, which, given that I've done both online courses and books, that was actually very encouraging to see. Another one was live seminars and mastermind type groups. In other words, masterminds are when you have a collection of people that are all working together, like that iron sharpens iron concept, where you are working not only on things that you're working on, but you're keeping other people accountable for what they're growing in as well. And so that's what a mastermind is, and is something that you know what, I talk about this a lot, so I'm not going to bore you with that. I'll let you go to the other video where I talk a lot more about that at the end here. But masterminds are really important to me, so I was glad to see them on that list. Let's talk about my favorite topic. Let's be honest, very much a C on the DISC scale. I like things to be ordered. And so a methodology is important. So methodology is essentially applied skills. Many of you expressed frustration with like badly executed projects, or when your company is basically doing things badly and just expects everyone to do it. And so what I've been diving into, and what I was diving into back in 2017 when I was originally putting the book together and kind of getting it ready conceptually and testing and researching. So this actually goes, oddly enough, back to 2017 even, and finding these different kind of company methodologies that are out there. And Agile was the new thing on the block. What I found is it's great for software development, but in IT services, which is where the majority of the people that were responding to this particular survey for sure were involved, yeah, Agile was actually causing more stress than it was solving. Very similar with DevOps. What I was getting a lot of is that DevOps was working well for some of the larger IT teams, but it was very frustrating for people that are in engineering and architect roles that have to do other things as well, because a lot of times the support was actually overwhelming their engineering processes and just made it so that they were actually, oof, this is going to get me into some trouble, and some people are going to really hate on me for this, but I'm just calling it like I see it. The places that had done DevOps were those that had the highest amount of technical debt. Sorry, I'm calling it like I'm seeing it, but that was a lot of the times when I saw that applied badly, and I was seeing an increase in technical debt, not less of it. So, and then you have what I've referred to as do what I want ops. when there's too many like ITIL processes controlling things, change control just becomes this running joke with everybody. I think of the Phoenix Project, which I know is a big DevOps book, obviously, but the kind of the running gag in there is that nobody's even paying attention to the change control. Nobody cares because it's just a big joke. And you know what? I see that a lot. So that is a big challenge. But let me tell you this very bluntly, as much as I can. What is most important to learn to advance your career is one thing. Can you guess it? It's soft skills. It's not the hard skills. It's the methodology. It's why you do things. It's what kind of things you're doing and kind of declaring those, writing them down, and writing down when these things are done, and having a whole methodology around this is critical. But also there's a lot of communication skills that go into this as well, and realizing that you cannot just be an island and just do your own show here if you want results. Now, I want you to notice that there's not a how in the methodology. How is more tactical. Methodology is more strategic. And so the individual little things, that's really for the mastery, which is why we include both. Now, this is something obviously that I can't not say that this is something I do in Just Do This, a simpler way to succeed in IT. I talk all about this methodology, and I like things being in fours. I don't know why, but there are 4 steps to the methodology: understand, plan, change, and then maintain. And it's a cyclical methodology where you can constantly repeat it and do it more simply. So it's a lot like DevOps was originally. I'm not completely sure that we can call it cyclical these days. I think it has morphed into more like Agile is in a lot of places. But this is a methodology that worked for me in many of my consulting engagements over the years, mostly because it is simple enough to integrate into any other methodologies successfully and be able to say, okay, I know you do things this way. This is the high level of how to communicate that. Next, we go into mentoring. This is a process of being supported by others, and that's why it is such a key with being able to be successful in your career. Again, you're not an island. You need to be able to be having relationships with others to be successful. So the question becomes, well, how do you know how to be successful wherever you're at? You have to know what the company's looking for, right? You have to know what the people that are around you would judge as success. And the best way to do that is to engage with a mentor. So this is not a counselor or a teacher. It's not something that is going to like psychoanalyze you or whatever. That's not what they do. They are guiding you towards what conclusions you need to make to be successful. They are, like I say all the time with my coaching clients, I'm your guide, not your ride. They're not there to give you everything about it. They are there to have their personal experiences given to you so you can draw your own conclusions and create your own personal experiences and then be able to pass that along to others. So having a mentor is far and away one of the fastest ways to advance in your career, because you're focusing in on, okay, what do I want to do? If I have an idea about what I want to do, then mentors can help me be successful because they were just there. Now, it wasn't part of the survey or anything like that, but I do want to mention that there's a book that I've been really enjoying. In fact, I'm reading it now for the second time. That was published earlier in 2025. And the book is by Rory Vaden, and it's called Wealthy and Well Known. Now, the book is about building a personal brand, which is something that obviously I think more of us in IT need to be doing. And it's something I'm going to be talking a lot more about, by the way. But there's a key here in what he says is the kind of the main thing about the book. And that is that you are best positioned to help the person that you once were. A mentor is someone that was where you are and is where you are wanting to go. So naturally, they're the ones best positioned to help you get there. Now, another key with mentoring is for you to be a mentor. just in the same way that you are learning from others that are where you want to be, no matter what. If you have worked in an office for 1 week, you already have more experience than somebody who is just coming in today. So even if you've been there a week, you already have more experience than that person who just got there. So you already can be a mentor. Not that I would recommend that specifically, but that kind of mindset about mentoring is really key, especially if you want to show leadership abilities and get into that like a large percentage of you said that you want to do. So those who mentor are often noticed by management for doing that. If they're doing it voluntarily or as part of a system, it doesn't matter. That's something that gets noticed fast because people that are in leadership were always looking for this. And I can tell you this from experience. There are people that I've promoted over the years because I saw that they had that heart of a teacher. They wanted to help other people grow. And so that was really, really important, but they sometimes need guidance as well. And so to be a good mentor, you really do need to have a good picture of how people need to advance and how to encourage them to build that on their own. But it means that you need to be goal oriented, not just opinion oriented. All right. I hope that helps with that. Now let's get to our final, and some would argue probably one of the more important of them. I like to balance things out as much as I can, but honestly, you really cannot get anywhere in information technology without the right kind of mindset. That is, having an alignment or attitude that is built towards growing and being successful. And so mindset, there's a couple things I can say about this. One is that if you do what you've always done, you get what you've always got, right? So if you're waiting to get that promotion to do something more, then you have something wrong with your mindset. So waiting for that promotion to happen to do things is not going to get you a promotion. We'll say mental alignment. I don't like using phrases that are so vague, but what I'll say about that is it is more visible than you think the way you approach situations. In other words, you might think that you're being stealthy in your attitude about things. If everything sucks, damn, users are stupid, all these kind of things that you might say silently, but sometimes we say the silent part out loud more than we think, more than we know we do. And that those built-in mindsets will project. And so if you want to advance your career specifically, but also just to be more happy doing this and have less traumas that are present in information technology, you really do need to work on your alignment, so to speak. I'm going to get on all new agey, I know, but what we've looked at, begging the question for a lot of the people we've been consulting with, is what has caused the most rapid success for people that are in information technology careers, specifically in services. I don't know if this really applies as much in the like software creation side of things or like web development kind of roles that are becoming more and more common in IT. But what I will say is that working together as a team, it was really crucial here. And it was really all about their attitude, their alignment, the way they carry themselves, the way they have conversations, not just the tone of voice was really important, but also just the general way they communicate. Is it like overly curse? Is that the right word? Terse? Terse. Is it overly terse? Or is it something where they are very precise? And so there's some nuances here that I'll get into in future videos about the DISC and things like that kind of help you understand how you naturally communicate and how you can adapt that to communicate better with others. We'll get into that. But if your attitude is more of appreciating what is possible and what is just inherently, I guess I could say good. Again, I don't like, when it comes to talking about mindset, I don't like getting all flowery in my speech. But at the same time, if you're willing to adjust your mindset then that is where you're going to find a lot more success. And this does not come naturally. Our natural way of operating, our default settings, if you will, is really not towards growth in this area. We tend to, by default, think of things the way they are, not the way they can be. But if you want to advance, in other words, you want to get to the point where you're not today, then your thinking has to change in that same kind of way. You have to advance forward in your thinking. I hope that's helpful to you. So as a bonus today, this is something I almost didn't include, but I was like, you know what? You've watched me this far. You've hopefully gotten a lot out of this. And so how do we apply that? And so what we're going to do is we're going to play a little game called Choose Your Own IT Career Adventure. And so I've chosen 3 different little presentation areas. And you want to do this live, we'll just roll the dice and see which one I click on. And so I'll just cover my eyes here and click on one. Okay, stay with more pay. And so what this means as an option is that you are going to stay in the same basic type position. Maybe you're in the same department and get and do the same roles. But what we're looking for here is getting more pay. And so what kind of things can we put in a performance improvement plan to get raises, to earn more respect, or to get other rewards? I've talked to a lot of people that are not realizing that they have like a sales element to their job and just never realized it. There's people that I've talked to that they work with services companies that if they can identify opportunities in their customers, because they're the ones that are spending the most time with them, if they can identify opportunities, a lot of times they're rewarded for that. They'll get a portion of the commissions or a lot of those kind of things just for identifying those opportunities. And so they're rewarded for that. And so that's a way you can actually stay in your position in those kind of cases. Same position, nothing's changed, but you're getting more money out of that. And so again, raises and things like that are usually subjective to your employer, but that's something you have to be proactive and say, okay, I want to get a raise this year. What kind of things do I need to do? I know that's a very difficult question for people to ask, but honestly, that's just what you need to do. So some advantages here with this are kind of some stability. Now, I'm going to caveat this for just a second and say that the last few years have proven that this statement may not be as currently accurate. Stability in IT has become a bit of a myth, but there's ways to do this where you're having less anxiety, you're able to provide continuously for your family, but also shift the way you're working with your income, like with some passive income things and things like that. So in other words, you're being smarter about your money so that you can actually stay where you are and still have stability. And so there's some things like that that I don't want to get into in this video, that if you want that kind of a thing, if you want to learn more of those techniques, that you're interested in staying with more pay, just put stay with more pay in the comments below, and I'll know that you want to do more of this, and we'll create some content around that. We'll do it that way. I'm sure I'll have another survey or something like that one of these days, but for now, just do that. So this can make for some good contentment. A lot of people, if they just challenge themselves to be a better person where they are, a lot of times you can be a lot more happy where you are now. If you are already pursuing a lot of your passion projects exactly where you are, if you are, well, not passion projects, I really should say that in the proper way that I'm talking about this. I have a whole other thing about pursuing your passions or what you spend your time on, and making sure that that is something that actually does fulfill you and that you feel you're naturally talented and gifted towards those kind of things, and those really become your passion areas. So if you're already there, then by all means, that's not really a reason for you to advance at that point. If you are doing exactly what you want to be doing with your life, then why change that? But let's look for some ways to be more content and more successful where you are. So what you do to focus in on this is really look at those methods. look at those soft skills that you need to, like communication and things like that, that you might need to learn more about to stay successful where you are. So look at those processes that you use from day to day and say, is there a way we can do this with less risk and more efficiently? And those kind of things are the kind of things that look for raises down the road, even if you stay where you are. And the other thing is, of course, if you're sticking around, you must like it. So let's mentor someone else. Let's get some other people that are coming up where you once were to get where you are now, and let's do some mentoring. All right, next up, let's go with Mosey with Moxie. This is one of my favorites. So this is seeking a new position, perhaps even a new direction. Like our survey indicated, a lot of people are looking for a completely new direction. Now, this can mean the same pay or a lot, hopefully better pay than you have now. But a lot of times that's not the driver. A lot of times the driver is that you just want to do something different, like a new type of work. In fact, in my case, one time I did this, I actually took a cut in pay just because I wanted to. Pay is a kind of relative term, I guess. I actually put myself in a position where I was asked to be a director of technology when I was already a very successful consultant. I could have just kept doing consulting work, but I really just wanted to change a little bit. And so I let the consulting gigs dry up for a bit and went into being this director of IT role. And so it was a new kind of work. Now, with that, oddly enough, I ended up taking a little bit of a cut in pay, but it opened a lot of other things up to me and actually was a great, not only learning experience for me, but actually did a lot of things even for my consulting work today because I was willing to do that and take that new direction. And so there's a sense of adventure here. So with some of you, you're looking to go solo. And I actually just put up a video about that 2 weeks ago. So you can go have a look at that video. But anyway, there's a lot of new challenges that go with that. If you're looking for either a new position or going solo, if you're going to go self-employed, but also a lot of times there's just new companies to work with that just end up being new ways to challenge yourself. But there's also sometimes a lot of incentives for your performance. And so that you wouldn't have otherwise because you're not in a position that would have that. And so it makes sense sometimes to do that. And if you are a seeker, and this is a good thing for you, if you're really saying, okay, I really don't know if I'm going to be happy doing the work I'm doing. So you're just finding where you're happy. In other words, what I found a lot of times is not that the work itself is making you unhappy. A lot of times it is the people that are around you. Sometimes it is literally just the attitudes that you have, or a lot of times it can actually be the people you are working for. But a lot of times it's just you. And so seeking out happiness where you are, sometimes that is a way to just mosey your attitude. But a lot of times you are actually just moving along. And so you're pursuing those passions. You're investing in the talents you have already and saying, okay, how can I amplify these to be more of what I want to be doing? Okay, there's focus areas with Mosey. So first off, in mastery, this really means especially if you're going to be going into a consulting role where you're going to work for a services partner, for example, and you want to be a consultant, knowing the technology really well and having a focus area, having a niche, if you will, that becomes super critical. And so in those kind of cases, that's one of the few times where I actually say, yeah, maybe go ahead and get some training or some certifications. I personally think certifications are a waste. A lot of them are really just money grabs from vendors. Yeah. And sorry, not sorry. I know some vendors out there that are probably not happy that I'm saying things like that, but I see it as a bit of a cabal out there. But when it comes to getting a new role, it's something new. A lot of times certifications are something you sometimes need for that. But also there's some areas of leadership that you want to be able to demonstrate and get some really good methodologies and mastery within. And so that becomes another area with that. But mindset is probably one of the more important things when you're looking to get into something new, where you really have to be willing to grow those talents to be more into passions and not just being what comes naturally or default to you. You really need to look into those kind of things that do come naturally to you and say, how can I spend some time developing this and really amplifying the things that are already easy for me? Finally, what if it's time to advance? What if it's time to shift? So this might mean a new position within your company. It might, once again, we're looking at raises here. An update to this survey, just based on some conversations with about a dozen or so of you in the last few months. Almost every single person was saying one thing to me, and that is that they had been basically voluntold to do a leadership position. In more than 2 of those cases, they were told that if they didn't want to be a team lead, then they might as well quit. Because, well, in one case, it was AI was going to be replacing their role. And if they didn't want to learn how to manage people that were managing the AI, basically, then they were going to be out of a job. That's really strange for me to hear because I've been such a IT services based person, but these are the realities is that a lot of people are getting into that position where they're being voluntold to be a leader. Now, sometimes this is just a promotion within your department too. A lot of times I'm finding that as like IT departments get larger, for example, a lot of times they will need to create layers of who's responsible for what. And again, this is something where I've seen a lot of iterations of this, but usually you see a 4-tiered system with the IT kind of services realm there. And so what you end up finding with that is that you need to promote people within your department to fill those roles. And so if you're in a service desk, maybe you become a subject matter expert. And a subject matter expert, maybe you become an administrator. And from an administrator, maybe becomes a senior administrator, or maybe then an engineer, and then a senior engineer, and then an architect. And then you see where I'm going for this, right? But there's promotions within that department to where you're just getting into new roles. Now, the thing to understand about this is when you take on a new job position, almost in every single case, it's not that you're just going to keep doing what you've been doing. We need to understand that fully, that it does not mean when you get a promotion into a new role, like a senior role, usually means that you're going to have to learn some sort of leadership skills. You're going to be the person that is going to be interfacing with management, with interfacing with other departments. So you're going to need to learn some communication skills. There's a lot of these kind of things that kind of go into that. So that's why these things are really important to be proactive about and be honest with yourself if that's really going to be you. Now, again, we talked about stability. If you're just going to advance within the company or shift a position within the company, you like the company. You've made that decision that these are people that I enjoy working for. And sometimes it is just vision based. Like you enjoy our vision or even mission. It might be another way to say that in certain companies where you just appreciate what they're there for and you just want to stay there, but you also want to advance in what you're doing. This also usually means that you're not physically required to move anywhere because you're already at that company, right? So in most cases, that's not all true at all, but and especially in the modern world and a lot of software development type roles, sometimes you might have to move. But in a lot of these, really another focus is that kind of achievement kind of things where the more you demonstrate your abilities to not only advance forward, but also thrive where you're at, that creates more stability for you in that company. Now, another thing to embrace here is, again, that challenge. There's some things that are tough here. And like I say all the time, you will not rise to the occasion. You'll only rise to your level of preparedness. Now, when it comes to challenging in that means that sometimes you're not fully prepared, but it's thrust upon you anyway, and you have to raise your level up to meet that. And that's part of life. You can't prepare for everything, but we have to be honest with ourselves about that. And sometimes when I'm talking about going into leadership roles, for example, we have to ask, can your peers adapt to that? Can you learn to present yourself now as the person who is either in charge, in some cases, like if you're going into management, Or if you're more of a team lead, a lot of times what it means is that you are directing who's doing what. Now, you're not their boss, but you're the one who's basically allocating based on that. And that can lead to some, well, to some hurt feelings if it's not done well. So there's a whole lesson on that, but you have to learn to advocate for them basically. But the cool thing about this is that once again, you might find that you have talents that you didn't know you had. You might find that like say this common example of becoming a team lead. What I'm seeing out there, and I'm really proud of a lot of you. I should probably get permission before I say names, but there are a lot of folks that I've been seeing that have embraced all these those 4 keys that I talk about, and really be able to say, oh, I didn't think I would be good at this element of leadership. One of them, I can say Douglas. I'm proud of you, Douglas. I think it's been awesome to see your progression these last few years. I'll say that. I think I'm okay with that. I think you're okay with it. But seeing Douglas advance from where he was just a few years ago to where he is now, where he is embracing a lot of skill sets and things like that within his same company, that he's being put into positions that he would have never dreamed of being in. In fact, I think at one point he actively rejected. But what he found by starting to do a little bit of it is like, oh, you know what? This does come naturally to me. This might just be an area of talents that I can develop and get into more of a passion area. And so that's exactly what he's doing. So I hope that was helpful. So some focus areas if you want to advance within your company or shift a position within your company. Obviously, methodology, those soft skills, documentation is really important here, especially when you are up for like a performance review type thing or want to kind of be able to demonstrate your achievements here. Communication skills, and of course, leadership. Can't not say leadership. For those of you that don't yet know, leadership has become such a focus with me that I have actually gone through a process of getting certified and joining up with the John Maxwell organization. And I am now an executive director within that structure of an independent executive director. So that means, like I do with my consulting work, I'm very independent in that regards, but I work under that structure now. And so I'm able to do that. So that's where I'm doubling down as well. More doubling down. I'm like quadrupling down on leadership. And that's a big driver with that. Now, obviously with the mastery side of this, certifications are probably helpful. Again, it's more of just that whole proving to somebody that may not be immediately within your network that you know what you're talking about. Those are those 3 areas you can do. But in any case, I do want to encourage you to fill out a form if you'd like to work with me. I'll have a QR code here there it is on the screen. And yeah, it'd be great to work with you. And so just to review what we've learned today, we talked a little bit about my story. And like I said, there's going to be a video I'll link here at the end with more about that. We talked about the survey results that you have given me, and I'm actually parsing for you here and how we respond to that. And so we learned about the 4 keys: mindset, mastery, methods, and mentoring. I change up the order every time. Don't be intimidated by that. And then we learned about different ways you can apply this within your career. So obviously this is a longer video, so the whole presentation that I've often given from the stage. That's why it's that whole keynote timing here. That's natural for me. We have so much more to cover. So what I want you to do is head to the next video, and I will see you there where we can learn even more about advancing your career. Don't just survive IT. You gotta thrive.